Welcome back, everybody, to the Sexy Business Podcast. Once again, I am your host, Spooky Dangerous, and joined with me is always Lewd Neko.
Hello.
Now, this is an episode that we sort of foreshadowed previously, talking about some of the games that we had played recently and we had liked. This game is Humans Are Not That Against Lizard Women. One of just the easiest of all titles to say. And that kind of is going to give you a hint as to, kind of what the quality of the game is like. But this is a Scalie zone. This is a Scalie safe area. We are going to put aside our furry biases for the day, and we're going to be talking about all things smooth and slick. Do you ever just hate the things that you're saying immediately?
Slick and moist scales.
Yeah. So this is an interesting one. I was obviously following this one because of the art style. I think the art style is very high quality. And it's interesting because I think that it's hitting a niche that is, unique is maybe not the right word, but underserved for sure. And seeing it pop up on the dash, you're like, wow, this is really high quality art. This is something interesting and different compared to a lot of the other stuff that we do see when it comes to character design in kind of the adult game space. And so I'm like, I'll check it out, see what it's like. I bought a copy of the game, and then I have very rudely leaked the files to Neko, but that is just so that we could both play the game. We could both get an idea of what the vibes are like. And so I'm going to throw it over to you, Neko. Tell me, how did you find the vibes of Humans Are Not That Against Lizard Women?
Well, right off the bat, I was like, oh, this feels a little familiar. When I was looking at the, what do you call it, like the roadmap or the choices screen, and it kind of shows you like the entire length of the story. It makes it really easy to go back in case you miss stuff. The flowchart, that's the word I was looking for. It is mostly a linear story from the looks of it, except for there are kind of a handful of extra CGs you can get if you get like the harder options in the gameplay, and we'll talk about that. And then it looked like there were some sections that are from a different POV but are still covering the same story. So this isn't like a choices matter, they're gonna be like major different endings or things like that. It's mostly linear with just some small differences, which is something that another furry match 3 game does. This is like the Furry Shades of Gay and Sex in the Furry Titty games by Furlough Studios, I believe, Furlough Games. They're a relatively popular furry game dev team, and their bread and butter is just match 3 furry games, and they do something similar with their choice system. So I was like, oh, interesting. And then I got to actually playing it, and there's a little introduction that sort of tells you about, it's about ancient Russians fighting lizard people, which is apparently a Russian meme or a joke, some sort of like in joke that I don't think either of us got, because neither of us are Russian. But if you are Russian, there's probably a lot of jokes and humor and references in this game I'm sure I missed because I don't get it. But once I got to the gameplay section, I was like, oh, this is identical to Furry Shades of Gay. That's really strange. And looking into it, I did notice that Furlough Games has retweeted this game like positively quite a few times. So they are aware of it. And while I don't have any proof of this, I do think they actually just gave them the code basically to Furry Shades of Gay so they could do like an asset flip, or they might be an offshoot of Furlough Games or
same
Furlough
developer
Studios.
but different studio name or something like that.
Yeah, I wasn't able to find anything concretely looking at credits and things like that, but there's definitely some sort of collab between them. So this wasn't stealing, which was initially my worry. And in that case, I was really surprised this game got past like, all of the Steam reviews and stuff. But knowing that it was some sort of collab, I mean, I think it makes sense to an extent. There's only kind of so much you can do with a match 3 without radically rewriting the rules, like something like Honey Pop, which changes how you play the match 3. And what Furry Shades of Gay did well is that it made the match 3 part of its choice system. So for example, you might get an option that's like, oh, you have option A to do this or option B to do that. And if you want option A, you have to get all of the green tokens. And if you want option B, you have to get all of the purple tokens. And so there are sort of different goals that will determine if you can get those bonus CGs or what what choices you end up making. And that was something that I did enjoy. I thought it added an element of replayability that was really fun, where even if you're playing the same level or map of the match three, you have a different goal each time. Though one of the drawbacks is that if you are not a match three fan, some of these can be quite difficult. There's a lot of sort of match three mechanics that aren't necessarily explained in game. It kind of just expects you to know how match threes work. But evidently, I was looking through a lot of reviews, and this was kind of the big complaint. Is some people were just like, the match three is way too hard. There's some levels that you can just get stuck on forever, and you have to replay it a million times. Some of the CGs are way too difficult to get, or items are too hard to get. And so I would say if you're not a match three person, that would definitely be a big drawback for this.
Yeah, this is something that I thought was really funny, hearing that kind of player sentiment, because recently we had a Sleeve Shock update where we added a new mini game where you're trying to break into a safe, but the safe basically displays a screen on the front that has fish swim past. And to type in the password, you are just tapping the correct fish, which should be really simple, right? But we actually got a few reviews just like, man, the fucking fish minigame is horrible. I was enjoying beating my meat right up until this exact moment, and it kind of ruined the vibe for me. And so I'm imagining that it's kind of the same for this, where it's like some of the match 3 segments are too hard, and that like you kind of hit a wall and you give up. You're like, oh, I'll open up fucking Pornhub instead because it's an easier experience. Me playing through the game, and I'm a person that has played a lot of match 3, I ended up getting only the easiest option every single time, because either I would run out of moves, or a couple of puzzles in, there's a mechanic of like I think it's a vine or something that slowly grows up, and if you're not removing it, it will continue to take up space. And so I'm spending time spinning down this one thing without actually making any progress in it. I'm wasting a lot of turns. So it just was generally difficult if I was trying to get any of the actual fancy content, which makes me wonder, like, if it is not specifically the same developer in a different studio name, and they've just lent the code to a friend so that they could make something, or someone that really wanted to work with this artist or do this kind of thing, but then they've not explained how to adjust the difficulty or to create a difficulty curve throughout the game so it starts easy and gets hard later, would kind of track. Like, that would kind of make sense with our initial impression of what's going on. But that said,
I mean, it kind of makes sense with like how this one is formatted compared to Furry Shades of Gay, because that one it's like a collection of 6 short stories. So the difficulty curve can be a little bit harsh, but that's because the stories are so short.
Yeah.
So they might have like 9 to 10 little, parts of the flow chart. And then usually like 1 or 2 will have particularly hard options that get you like the extra sexy CG, or the like the threesome, or something that's like particularly spicy. And, in that case, if you're like, oh, I'm really struggling on this short story, you can always just be like, oh, I'm going to go play another one, and then I'll come back to this later. You do also earn like money in the game, and you use the money to buy items. So these are things like getting 5 more moves, or getting a bomb, or being able to take out one particular token. And oftentimes these items were how I had to win the really hard ones, because there are frankly some challenges that are just almost unbeatable without items in some way.
Yeah,
like you would have to be extremely like lucky when it comes to your RNG, or you would just have to be like incredibly good at planning your match 3. And when you're trying to look at, furry or scaly titties, that's probably not the first thing on your mind. I do think having a difficulty setting, or some way to get more items easily, or even just like a story mode play, like a difficulty setting, would probably open up this game to other kinds of players. So that way it's like, if you just want a straight visual novel with choices and no match 3, like you can play it like that. And then that way, if you're someone who does enjoy the match 3s, you turn on your difficulty, you turn on that option, you have fun with it. But also for the people who legitimately just want to sit down and read a story, like you have that option there too. Because I think for some people it was frustrating to be like, oh, finally a furry visual novel that caters to my specific Scalie niche that is not really being met by a vast majority of the furry visual novels currently out. And then if you get cock blocked by match 3 game, that can be pretty frustrating.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the story a little bit. I feel like it was really easy to glaze over it. I feel like some of the language problems it has is because the original language is Russian, and then it was translated into English, either via human or an AI. We're not sure. And that will explain some things, like why the title is really jank. Like, yes, humans are not that against lizard women is really specific and evocative of something, but it's really long, and it is not a way that we would commonly describe something. Like, I would say I am not that against Vegemite that often for it to be a thing that would be, like an idiom or whatever that you could use in a title that would be easily referenceable. And then a lot of the dialogue and kind of the way that the story is delivered to you kind of feels that same way. Sometimes you're just like, I'll skip over this, or I don't understand, whatever, I'll go to the next thing. But the story kind of really generically is, it gave me like a weird Warhammer vibe, where a lot of the like lizard people and the factions that you encounter, it's very written from like, we are in a wartime, there is a conflict happening, and it has like an overarching interest in the factions specifically. And then you do meet some more specific characters, and then it starts to feel like it's teetering towards a Romeo and Juliet kind of thing, where it's like, oh no, you're a human and I'm a lizard. Could we really make it work in this crazy world of ours? And that obviously is not something too crazy, but how insane and in-depth are we expecting the writing in a porn game to be, especially when it's not in a native language? And especially if it is based around some kind of meme that we weren't told at the start, right?
Yeah, I will say, like, I pretty much skipped through most of the story just because I was trying to get a feel for the game. It is definitely a lot chunkier when it comes to the story content and the written content compared to like the Furlough games. Their stories are pretty quick and snappy. They're very like porny stories where it's like, oh, I'm at a boutique and a sexy fox woman came in and she wants me to help her pick her lingerie. Like, it's very much these, they have like some cute, funny moments, but for the most part, they're meant to be like comedic. They're just meant to have a couple of interesting little characters, and they're really easy to just like skim through. So if you're not interested, you can skim through and you're still going to get a feeling of like what's going on in the story just by following the art. Whereas this one does have a lot of different characters. It does have a lot of lore to it. There are some, pretty significant amounts of reading in between the match threes, which can be like, again, it's like a positive or a negative. If you're someone who wants this like more in-depth storyline, you want just one long continuous story, you'll really enjoy this game. But if you're someone who's maybe going to get bored by having really long narrative sections, especially since sometimes that means you're not getting a lot of lewd content during those sections, you might get something a little titillating, but usually they hide most of that behind those difficult options in the match 3. So I could see that potentially being a little disappointing if you're just expecting something you can kind of breeze through. One of my issues with it is one of the things I liked about Furlough games is because they offer you 6 short stories, you get a lot of different characters, because most of the characters don't have just 2 furries or other creatures. They do have some Scalies. They have a Scalie in one story. But they might have like a group of friends, and then you get to see a bunch of different configurations, or they might have different potential love interests. And from like kind of this furry or monster fucker perspective, the benefit with that is that in one game, you can have a fox, fox, you can have a bull, you can have a horse, you can have a bunny girl, you can have a lizard girl, you can have all sorts of configurations of different furries, which is really attractive for the furry fandom. That's what they like to see in things. Whereas because this one is focused solely on lizard women and not even just Scalies broadly, but like specifically this particular brand of lizard women, if you're not into the designs that you're going to see on the store page, that's 80 to 90% of the lewd content. So if you're really not into like the main character, you might not enjoy many of the CGs. There are some CGs that feature human characters. There's a couple of like these Russian women that either have sex with the main character or they have sex with some of the lizard men. So there is a little bit of diversity going on there. But again, that could be a potential limiting factor. Or if you were like, I love this lizard lady so much, you were in for a great time.
Human women are not that against lizard men.
The sequel. Actually, that would be like the spin-off series because there's already a sequel.
There is already a sequel. That is what I wanted to glide into next, is because today or yesterday, like really recently, they have announced that there is going to be Humans Are Not That Against Lizard Women 2. So they didn't even come up with a different title for the sequel. It is just the second one. And so I'm assuming that they're trying to just do a really, really long-running story across different things. From looking at the store page of the second game, it's difficult to tell if it does just run on or if it is wholly different characters or a different time setting or whatever, because the way that they design their store page is much more about showcasing the art, and the art being the thing that the game does best. Like if you you know, in Mario Kart, when you select your kart and it gives you 3 different stats, which is like acceleration, top speed, and turning, and there's like a bar. If you imagine gameplay, writing, and illustration, then illustration is maxed out and the other 2 are quite low comparatively. To paint a visual picture for you.
Yeah, one of the downsides of the furlough games, and I'm basically considering this one of them, is that essentially all of the games are the exact same, just with different art and stories.
Yeah.
At least in the case of Furry Shades of Gay, I would honestly not be surprised. I'd have to go and compare if they actually even change like the maps or the gameplay mechanics at all in between them. But I don't remember any significant changes. You know, comparing that to something like Honey Pop, where 1 and 2 have drastically different gameplay systems. Where, you know, the second game was based around this whole threesome gameplay system where you have to balance each of the girls' likes and dislikes. And the first game is a little bit more traditional. For the most part, Furlough Games keeps it pretty classic, match 3, and so you're really only paying to see new stories and to see new art and new characters. It looks like this one is going to be a little bit of a continuation. It looks like it has a lot of the same characters and some more spicy scenes. There is a demo, so you know, if you are interested in just trying out the game in general, you might actually want to go to the sequel first and try its demo, and then if you like it, you can go backwards, because I don't believe they have a demo for the first one, which is a bit of a strange choice, but hey.
Yeah, I think it's because it kind of started with the itch.io release, and then now because it's with, was it Horny Capybara?
Yeah, that's the developer or the publisher.
The publisher.
Yeah,
now it's partnered with the publisher. It's been able to be put onto Steam. Now, we had a look into the publisher as well, and they've only got a handful of projects on there, which doesn't include Humans Are Not That Against Lizard Women. It only has the sequel, which I think is also interesting. So my read of what's happened is that the first game has come out, it's gone on itch.io, they've gone, okay, this is us proving that we can do it, we kind of understand what's going on, we've made a game, we're happy with the game, let's try and do it again bigger.
They also published the first one. I don't think they were always behind it, but I think when the full version was made, they have picked it up. It's I think one of their top sellers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it looks like the only other thing, I looked into what they've made. They made a gacha game called Overlewd that was pretty much like most of the reviews were like, this is a shitty gacha where you have to pay to win. They have something called Hentai Stories that looked fine. You know, it had fine looking art. It just looks like it's another match 3, I think. So it might be a similar vibe. It might actually be the same gameplay system. I don't know. We'd maybe have to check that one out at the future. And then the one thing that turned me off or made me really wary of them as a company is that they have an upcoming release called Getting Inside Hentai Story Demo. So I don't know if that's actually part of the hentai stories um, universe, but Getting Inside is AI generated art, and it's very obvious. I was able to look at it right away and be like, is AI generated art. And they kind of excused it at the bottom by saying, P.S. Yes, we use AI, but our artists are carefully working on it, cleaning out all of the bugs and giving the drawings an individual style. I hope this doesn't stop you from enjoying the game. But it does. It does immediately stop me from enjoying the game. And the big problem with that is as soon as I see a publisher who is okay with this, I'm immediately suspicious of every other game they've published because as of right now, the problem with AI is that we have to kind of just hope that people are being truthful about what they're saying in their store page. It's oftentimes difficult to always prove whether or not AI art has been used beyond like a reasonable doubt. I will say it seems like Lizard Women is fine. Their artist is actually incredible. They have a really amazing Twitter and Fur Affinity page that has lots of art, and they even do commissions. So I have no worries really about Lizard Women, but I do have some concerns about other games from this company or from this publisher. So if you do end up exploring them, just, be aware or be cautious.
Yeah, it's also kind of like a flag that because our concerns are less with the developers. Well, upon encountering the game, we were worried that it was stolen code or assets or whatever, right? To try and duplicate a game quicker. And that kind of signaled a flag. We're like, okay, is this something to be concerned about? Because it's indicative of cutting corners. And then in discovering the publisher was kind of doing the same thing, releasing an AI game, which is indicative of cutting corners. Then we're like, okay, what things are they really, what parts are we going to suffer for this as consumers? What parts is this where they're trying to exploit people and, unethically create content to generate income without actually contributing to the community or the other creators and stuff that work on that. And so far, it's on okay terms. But it is a little sus, and a lot of we talk about a lot of games, we look at a lot of different stuff, and part of it is always going to be buyer beware, right? Like, we can only ever talk about our first-hand experience with something, which is always going to be relatively far removed from the actual creator themselves. And that's why we do try and reach out to creators and try and get interviews so people can come and talk about their project themselves, and we get to ask them those questions like, how is this done, or what parts of this do you think are the best, and then they are able to give you the best first-hand kind of source as to what something is, rather than our experience of what that thing is. And so this is one of those situations where it would have been really good to potentially get someone from the team to come in and talk to us, and maybe that's something that we'll continue to try and make happen in the future. But when it comes to us getting interviews, we have a lot of times when we'll reach out to someone and be like, hey, look, really love the project, would you be interested in coming and doing an interview and coming and talking to us about the game on the show? And they'll be like, oh, sorry, English not first language, I definitely can't speak well enough for a podcast. And it's kind of awkward like that.
Yeah, in general, I think a lot of NSFW game devs don't know how to market or how to project a public image. Like the really successful ones we've seen, thinking all the way back to Academy 34, is one of the things they were really good at is they were great at marketing the shit out of their game. They had a fucking TikTok, which is like insane. It's not something you would think of doing for an adult game, but they were able to make silly memes and funny haha videos that got people to go, hey, what is this coming from, or what game is this? Because that's how a lot of people encounter these games. A lot of folks who would potentially be customers for these games are like maybe a little bit too nervous to explore that side of Steam or itch.io, or they just don't even know it exists. I've talked to so many people who are my age and they don't even realize that adult games are like this massive subgenre that has like thousands of options that you can choose from. They're like, oh, there's probably only like 5 games in existence that do this, and one of them is Baldur's Gate 3.
The other one
Um,
is Cyberpunk or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So, marketing your game, whether that's making funny videos or having a couple different social media accounts, doing interviews, or trying to get anything really published about your game outside of just Steam and Itch.io, can be really invaluable for bringing some attention to your game that isn't just going to be, mainstream folks. And I think especially if you're, targeting a niche like furries or scalies, you can think of all the ways that you could potentially talk to people in that scene, talk to the scaly furries, or like, reach out to a fursuiter and maybe have them promote the game or something. And that would immediately get like so many eyes on this, especially since the furry fandom is a particularly porn positive fandom who also generally enjoy supporting artists. They're the kind of people who would actually buy a game rather than pirating it.
And compared to other industries like the video game industry, or the safe for work video game industry more specifically, and a lot of other creative fields like that, normally when you encounter other professionals in the space, that a lot of people have like a really easy understanding of what resources are available to everyone. And it's like usually because either they've gone through university and they've studied professionally in a category, or they've been part of the networking effort where it's a lot easier to network when you are there in flesh space and you're interacting with other developers and stuff like that. And that this is a thing that the NSFW industry kind of doesn't have. We see some of it when it comes to adult video network awards kind of stuff, where actual porn stars will get up on stage and interact and do interviews and stuff like that. But like none of that exists for illustrations or game devs or lewd tubers or like a lot of that kind of stuff. It's really hard to find a network of other creators and interact with them in a positive way to try and big ups each other. And that's kind of what we try and do here a lot on the podcast. We're always trying to interact with other creators. We're always talking to people, talking to like publishers, we're talking to voice actors, we're talking to illustrators, we're talking to all kinds of different people to try and see who we can kind of spotlight on the show. But it is always difficult to kind of make those collaborations happen, because when the only thing you're interacting with is somebody's illustrations, you don't get a sense for what languages they speak, or how old they are, or all these other kind of barriers that might exist to try and make these things happen. And that can only get better over time if people actually work together and try and make this space one where people are helping out and collaborating when it comes to marketing. Like THM and Foodadom World did a collaboration and stuff like that, and it was really successful. And trying to find other creators or artists or VAs to come and contribute something in a way that you can spotlight them, and gives everyone working on that thing the ability to overlap in audience, which I think is really important. And it's something that's kind of how we've approached it, where we're working with people to make things happen. And that's something that obviously we recommend that you, potential budding horny game dev, consider also.
Just sneak into our DMs. We'll talk to you. We don't care who you are. We'll talk to anyone. Talk to us about your lewd game, please.
I mean, it would be nice to get actual game devs in my DMs instead of dick pics for a change.
Yeah, or Bitcoin.
Yeah, or Bitcoin. The amount of DMs that I have, which is just an account name and a password, it's just, please go away. But that's going to wrap for this episode of the Sexy Business Podcast. We're always on the lookout for something new and interesting to come in and talk about. We don't always have a lot of time to do a really big deep dive, because we only like to do these little 30-minute episodes, and there's kind of a lot to cover with this kind of stuff. So if you do want to see a little bit more of a longer experience in something, Lewd Neko is always streaming some cool stuff over on her channel. We did the THM collectible card unboxing over there, but there is also always stuff like playing through other cool games for you to go and check out. And also just come and follow us on Twitter, come and buy my game, sign up to my Patreon, spend all your money on me, all that good stuff. And then subscribe to the podcast, because the bigger the podcast is, the easier it is to pull guests. If we have 200 subscribers and we reach out to somebody big and go, hey, we want to interview you for the show, it's a lot harder for them to want to say yes, because they feel like they're not going to get that much in return. And the reason why we were able to score stuff like the Bishojo Mum interview is because we had worked with her in the past to do content for THM, right? And so it was kind of like an extension of promoting that thing that she had already done for us. And for us to get other cool guests that we're not already working with, it helps to have a proof of audience. So if you're watching this and you're not subscribed, you've watched 30 minutes of it, we were really cool and we impressed you very much. So please press that subscribe button. And we'll see you next week when we've got some really cool stuff planned and we're getting really close to episode 69. And you better believe we have something really cool planned for the sex episode, for the sex number, because we have forethought like that. We're really cool, and you should stick around for that next time on the Sexy Business Podcast.